Is there any danger on talking about if you're doing squats?
Yeah.
With a weight, say we're in the squat rack, depending on the angle of my foot, should we be a little bit angled out? Also, the gap of my leg, should I be at shoulder width? And is there any, and this is kind of three parts of the concept of the squat, the foot angle, also the knee's going to follow the foot alignment.
Yeah.
The depth of your squat, should you be passing 90 degrees on the knee? Is there trouble for the knees? And also the width of your leg, should it be shoulder width? Can you talk a little bit about maybe the dangers or what could occur or what you should be doing or what you recommend for that to avoid any dangers, or what is best? Sorry, it's a bit long-winded on that one.
Yeah. Well, anatomically, the hip depends on your anatomy in some ways, because some people can squat fully and have no problem. Some people have to turn their legs out to squat fully. Some people almost like would deviate and change their legs in. Not so much on that one. But so anatomically, the hip will design whether you can squat correctly or not. But then I always say you have to work with what you got. Because if you start changing things, like when you're saying the foot, are you changing the foot or are you changing the hip? Because if a knee is bent and you're doing that, then that is obviously my tibia is externally rotating. But if my leg is straight, now it's my hip that's externally rotating. Do you know what I mean? Okay. So, but I always say that when you're bending, try if you can to get the kneecap to go towards your second toe. Okay. But the foot should be in what we call subtalar joint neutral. So the foot should be neutral. I almost say walk on the spot and just stop. And that would be your anatomical position. If you start to take the legs wider or altering things, it's almost unnatural. Okay, because when you bend to pick something up, you don't automatically think, what is my knee doing, what's my hip doing, what's this doing? So it almost has to be quite natural. Glutes work better after 45 degrees. Okay, so whenever you are wanting to work the more of the gluteus maximus, then the angle of the knee, that's 90 degrees. So when you were trying, that's obviously for the knee, not the hip, but the glute is better. So as long as you're going towards 45 onwards, you don't really have to pass 90, because if there's a potential issue within the knee, then like the menisci, or if your technique is not so good, because when people load the bar and then they load the glute, the knees can very quickly change position. So the knees have a tendency to drift inwards. So you get this called a medial knee drift, and then it loads the ligament on the inside called the medial collateral ligament in here. So, and a lot of people go to, it's like a lot of people like outride themselves because they buy too big an engine on a motorbike. Like a 250 is suffice for most people, but a lot of people buy a 350 or 450 or 500, and they, and it's the first bike. And it's the same with squatting. They say, well, I'll have a go at 100 kilogram squat. It's like, don't be ridiculous, okay? Because your knee and your back, the technique, your core is not going to handle that. So I always say that you go lighter in the weight, but you might do a bit more repetition. So that extra weight is not going to load the disc, because that load on your spine is not the best. And sometimes to do that exercise, what I show on a ball, where you load it by just holding dumbbells, then you can do like variations as you're doing it. So but it's governed by the hip, is the position whether you can squat fully or not, and also the full flexion of the knee. But for me, for certain sports, yes, you have to. But for the majority of people in gymnasiums and for most sporting events, to go towards 90 would suffice, even less than 90. Okay, so further than that, sometimes you deviate. Okay, the foot will pronate a bit more, the knees will drift in a bit more. The knee might have a tendency to turn out, to turn in, depending anatomically if the hip is allowed to do that. But medically, it's called like a retroversion. So the hips are anatomically facing outwards. Then you naturally want to have the hips externally rotated to squat deeper. Whereas if you turn the legs in and you got this hip I'm mentioning, you would struggle to do a squat towards 90.
And if you enjoyed this content, we're doing 5 clips like this a week. If you want to watch the full podcast, click here.